My own daughter stole my credit card to buy her father-in-law an $8 500 luxury watch for Thanksgiving, then tossed me a $5 lottery ticket like I was some charity case. If this wins big, I get half since I bought it, she laughed. My blood boiled, but I stayed quiet. When that ticket delivered $85 million, I taught her the most expensive lesson of her life. She demanded her share, but discovered what betrayal actually costs. Before we continue with Polly's remarkable journey, if you enjoy stories about family loyalty and standing up for what's right, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and share where you're listening from in the comments below. We share meaningful stories every week that celebrate the dignity of hard work and the strength found in life's unexpected turns. The smell of roasted turkey still fills my memory when I think about that Thanksgiving day mixed with the salt air that always drifted through my little house here in Seaside, Maine. I'd set the dining room table with my late wife Margaret's good china, the set we'd bought piece by piece during our 40-year marriage. The afternoon light streamed through windows that looked out over the harbor, where I'd worked for 4 decades, loading ships and unloading dreams. Mo arrived fashionably late, as always, her heels clicking against my worn hardwood floors like an impatient drumbeat. She wore one of those expensive outfits that cost more than my monthly pension, all sharp angles and designer labels that seemed to cut through the warm, homey atmosphere I'd tried so hard to create. "Sorry we're late, Dad," she said, not sounding sorry at all. Behind her came Winston Caldwell, her father-in-law dressed in what I'd learned to recognize as his casual uniform, perfectly pressed khakis, and a sweater that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. Winston surveyed my modest home with that particular look wealthy people get when they're slumming it, his eyes taking inventory of my second-hand furniture and faded family photographs. "Polly," he said, extending a manicured hand that had never seen a day of honest labor. "Thank you for hosting." We settled around my small table, the 3 of us, creating an awkward triangle of conversation. I'd made all of Mo's childhood favorites, stuffing with sage from Margaret's old garden, cranberry sauce from scratch mashed potatoes whipped with real butter. Simple food made with love, the kind that had sustained our family through lean years and good ones alike. "This looks wonderful, Dad," Mo said, though she picked at her plate like a bird, probably worried about calories or carbs or whatever rich people worried about these days. Winston, meanwhile, dominated the conversation with stories about his hedge fund's latest acquisitions, his voice carrying that particular tone of a man who'd never doubted his own importance. I nodded politely, sipping my coffee and watching my daughter hang on his every word like gospel. "Speaking of acquisitions," Mo said suddenly, her voice taking on that bright, artificial quality I'd learned to dread. "We brought gifts." She reached into her designer handbag and produced 2 items. The first was an elegant jewelry box, the kind with velvet lining and gold hinges that whispered expensive even before you opened it. This she placed carefully in front of Winston, with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "For everything you've done for our family," she said, her voice warm with genuine affection. Winston opened the box to reveal a gleaming Rolex, its gold face catching the afternoon light like a small sun. "Mo, this is extraordinary," Winston breathed, lifting the watch with the appreciation of a man who understood quality. "This must have cost a fortune." "Only the best for you," Mo replied, beaming with pride. Then, almost as an afterthought, she turned to me and tossed something across the table. A crumpled scratch-off lottery ticket, the $5 kind they sell at every convenience store in Maine, landed beside my coffee cup with all the ceremony of yesterday's newspaper. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad," she said with a laugh that cut through me like winter wind off the Atlantic. "If this wins big, remember we're partners. I bought it, so half is mine." I picked up that ticket, my weathered fingers smoothing out the wrinkles, and forced myself to smile. But deep inside, my Irish blood was beginning to boil, and I knew this Thanksgiving would be one neither of us would ever forget. 3 days after that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, I sat at my kitchen table with my monthly ritual spread before me like evidence in a trial. The morning light filtered through my salt-stained windows, casting long shadows across bank statements, utility bills, and the careful records I'd maintained for 40 years of working-class life. My coffee had grown cold in its mug, the same chipped ceramic cup Margaret had given me for our 20th anniversary. The words "world's best husband" had faded over the years, just like so many other things in my life, but I still used it every morning out of habit and love. I traced my finger down the credit card statement, checking each line item with the methodical precision that comes from a lifetime of watching every penny. Grocery store purchases, the modest amount I'd spent on Thanksgiving dinner ingredients, my prescription medications that seemed to cost more every month despite Medicare, Everything accounted for everything expected. Then I saw it. Premium timepieces, $8, 547.99. The numbers blurred before my eyes, as if my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes with weathered knuckles, and looked again. The amount remained unchanged, staring back at me like an accusation. My hands began to tremble as I cross-referenced the date with my calendar. The 20th of November, 2 days before Thanksgiving, 2 days before Mo had presented Winston with that gleaming Rolex like she was crowning a king. The realization hit me like a rogue wave off the Atlantic, the kind that used to slam into the docks during my working days and leave you gasping for breath. Mo still had authorized access to my credit card, a precaution I'd set up years ago when Margaret was dying, and I thought I might need help managing things. I'd forgotten about it, completely trusting my daughter the way fathers are supposed to trust their children. But she'd used it to buy her father-in-law an $8 500 watch while tossing me a $5 lottery ticket, like I was some kind of charity case begging for scraps at her table. I pushed back from the table so hard my chair scraped against the linoleum floor, the sound echoing through my empty house like a scream. My chest felt tight the way it had when the doctor told me about Margaret's cancer. That same crushing weight that makes it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to believe that people you love can hurt you so deeply. The phone felt heavy in my shaking hands as I dialed Mo's number. Each ring seemed to last forever, mixing with the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Outside, seagulls cried over the harbor, their voices sharp and mournful, like a funeral dirge for the relationship I was about to destroy. "Hello, Dad." Her voice carried that particular tone of bored politeness she used when I interrupted her busy, important life. No warmth, no genuine interest, just the minimum courtesy required for family obligations. "Mo," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm looking at my credit card statement. There's a charge for over $8, 500 from premium timepieces." Silence stretched between us like a taut rope, filled only by the distant sound of her office environment, the muffled conversations of people who mattered in her world. Then she laughed. Actually laughed light and dismissive, as if I'd told her some mildly amusing joke instead of confronting her about theft. "Oh, that. I bought Winston his watch. He deserves something nice for once, Dad. After everything he's done for our family, it's the least we could do." The casual way she said "we," as if my money had somehow become our money, as if my 40 years of backbreaking labor had earned her the right to spend my retirement savings on someone who looked down on me like I was dirt beneath his. Expensive shoes. That's when I knew our relationship had changed forever. "Mo," I said, gripping the phone tighter, "you took $8 500 from my account without asking. That's theft." Her laugh cut through the phone line like broken glass. "Theft, Dad, don't be so dramatic. I used family money for a family gift. Winston has always been there for us financially. This is just returning the favor." "Family money." The words came out strangled. "That's my retirement money, Mo. Money I earned loading ships for 40 years while you were growing up. Money that was just sitting there doing nothing," she snapped, her voice taking on that sharp edge I remembered from her teenage years when she didn't get her way. "You wouldn't have spent it anyway. You never spend money on anything important." I stared out my kitchen window at the harbor, watching lobster boats bob in the morning swell. Those boats represented everything I understood about honest work, about earning your keep, about the dignity that comes from providing for your family through sweat and sacrifice. "Important," I repeated. "What's important, Mo? That watch cost more than I spend in 6 months." "Exactly my point," she said, and I could hear her moving around her office, probably pacing the way she did when she was building up to one of her lectures. "Winston showed us what real success looks like. He helped us buy our house, paid for Tyler's private school, covers our country club membership. He's been more generous to our family than—" She stopped herself, but the words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. "More generous than what, Mo?" "More generous than your father." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant sound of her office life continuing around her. When she finally spoke, her voice was colder than a Maine winter. "Winston earned his success, Dad. He built something. He contributed to society. He deserves recognition for everything he's done." Each word hit me like a physical blow. I thought about the ships I'd loaded, the cargo that fed families across New England, the honest sweat I'd poured into every day's work. I thought about the double shifts I'd worked to pay for her college, the overtime hours I'd put in to afford her textbooks, the nights I'd fallen asleep in my chair because I was too exhausted to make it to bed. "And what about everything I've done?" I asked quietly. Another pause. When she answered, her voice carried a dismissive tone that made my chest ache. You did what fathers are supposed to do, Dad. That's just basic responsibility. Winston went above and beyond. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. 40 years of sacrifice reduced to basic responsibility, while Winston's money made him a hero worthy of an $8.500 tribute. Mo, that money represents my security. My future. You can't just take it because you think someone else deserves it more. I'll pay you back, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice, no timeline, no plan. Just empty words, meant to end an uncomfortable conversation. When I can. Maybe for Christmas. Look, Dad, I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Eric thinks you're overreacting about this whole thing. It's not like you needed it for anything important. There it was again. Not important. My financial security, my peace of mind, my trust in my own daughter. None of it important enough to warrant a conversation longer than the time between our meetings. This conversation isn't over, Mo. Yes, it is, she said, her voice final. I did something nice for someone who's been good to our family. If you can't understand that, then maybe you need to think about what family loyalty really means. The line went dead with a sharp click that echoed through my empty kitchen like the sound of a door slamming shut. I sat there holding the phone, listening to the dial tone mix with the crying of seagulls outside my window, and realized that my daughter had just shown me exactly what family loyalty meant to her. The silence that followed Mo's cruel dismissal settled over my kitchen like fog rolling in from the Atlantic. I sat there for a long moment, the phone still warm in my hand, listening to the familiar sounds of my neighborhood waking up around me. Mrs. Murphy next door was hanging laundry on her line, the wooden clothespins clicking against each other in the morning breeze. Somewhere down the street, Tom Henderson was starting up his old pickup truck, the engine coughing to life like it had every morning for the past 15 years. These were the sounds of honest people, living honest lives, and they reminded me of who I was underneath all this hurt and betrayal. I was Paul O'Brien, and I'd spent 63 years taking care of myself and my family without asking for handouts or stealing from anyone. It was time I started acting like it. I pulled out my wallet and found the customer service number printed on the back of my credit card. My hands were steadier now than they'd been during the call with Mo, filled with purpose instead of shock. The automated system tried to route me through a maze of options, but I pressed 0 repeatedly until I heard a human voice. First National Bank Customer Service, this is Rebecca speaking. How can I help you today? I need to revoke authorized access to my credit card account. I said, my voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that comes from making a decision and sticking to it. Someone has been making unauthorized purchases. Rebecca's voice carried professional sympathy as she walked me through the process. Within 15 minutes, Mo's access was terminated. New security measures were in place, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the solid certainty of protecting myself. Is there anything else I can help you with today, mister? O'Brien, no, that covers everything. Thank you. I hung up and looked around my kitchen with new eyes. The modest space felt different somehow, not shabby or small, but honest. Clean, mine. The morning light streaming through my windows seemed brighter, and the familiar weight of worry that had settled on my shoulders since Margaret's death felt a little lighter. My gaze fell on the kitchen trash can, and I remembered the lottery ticket lying crumpled among the coffee grounds and yesterday's newspaper. The $5 joke that Mo had thrown at me like I was some kind of charity case begging for scraps at her table. Even this pathetic gesture had been bought with money stolen from my own account. The irony was almost laughable. She'd stolen from me to buy me a gift, then claimed half ownership of whatever it might be worth. It was the perfect symbol of everything wrong with our relationship, her taking what wasn't hers, and then demanding gratitude for the privilege. I walked over to the trash can and stared down at that crumpled piece of paper. Part of me wanted to leave it there, to let it rot with the rest of the garbage as a reminder of how little my daughter thought of me. But another part, the part that had survived 40 years on the docks and raised a family and buried a wife, wanted to see exactly what her contempt had purchased. I reached in and pulled out the ticket, smoothing it against my kitchen counter. The numbers stared back at me, 714233542 and Powerball 18. Just random digits on a piece of paper that cost $5 and represented everything my daughter thought I was worth. But as I looked at those numbers, something stirred in the back of my mind. A memory from 3 nights ago, sitting in my living room with the television on, half listening to the evening news, while I nursed a cup of tea and tried not to think about how empty the house felt without Margaret's laughter. Filling the rooms, the lottery drawing. I'd barely paid attention, but those numbers looked familiar. Disturbingly familiar. My heart began to race before my mind fully caught up with what I was thinking. I grabbed a pen from my kitchen drawer and wrote the numbers down on a napkin, then walked to my living room where yesterday's newspaper lay folded on my coffee table. There on page 3 in small print that most people probably skipped right over were the winning Powerball numbers from 3 nights ago. 714233542 and Powerball 18. Perfect. Every single number matched. I sat down hard in my living room chair, the same worn recliner where I'd watched the evening news 3 nights ago, half listening to the lottery drawing while my mind wandered to grocery lists and prescription refills and all the small concerns that fill the days of a man living alone. The newspaper trembled in my hands as I read the numbers again, then looked at the ticket, then back at the newspaper. 7, 1, 4, 2, 3, 3, 5, 4, 2, and Powerball 18. Perfect. Every single digit matched exactly. This had to be a mistake, a hallucination brought on by stress and the emotional beating I'd taken from my own daughter. People like me didn't win the lottery. We bought tickets as small dreams, dollar fantasies that helped us get through another week of making ends meet on a pension that seemed to shrink every month. But the numbers didn't change no matter how many times I looked. My hands shook as I reached for my phone and dialed the lottery hotline, following the automated prompts with the careful attention of a man afraid he might wake up from a dream. The mechanical voice confirmed what I already knew but couldn't quite believe. The winning Powerball numbers for the drawing held 3 nights ago are 714233542 with Powerball 18. The jackpot amount is $85 million. $85 million. I hung up and stared at the crumpled lottery ticket in my palm, this piece of garbage that Mo had tossed at me like I was some kind of beggar grateful for scraps. The joke gift she'd bought with my own stolen money, then claimed half ownership of with that cruel laugh that still echoed in my ears. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Margaret died. The overwhelming sensation of the world shifting beneath my feet, of everything I thought I knew about my life suddenly becoming obsolete. I was worth $85 million. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, more than I'd ever dreamed of having, more than Winston Caldwell probably had in his hedge fund accounts. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the harbor, where fishing boats were heading out for the day's work. Those men would spend the next 12 hours hauling traps and fighting weather for a few $100s, if they were lucky. Honest work, the kind I understood and respected, the kind I'd done for 40 years without complaint. But now with this ticket I had more money than all of them would make in their entire working lives combined. The phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. For a wild moment I wondered if somehow the Lottery Commission had discovered my win and was calling to congratulate me. But the caller ID showed my sister Margaret's number. "Polly, I just heard from my neighbor that Mo posted something on Facebook about you cutting off her credit card access. She's saying some pretty harsh things about you being selfish with money." I almost laughed. Selfish with money? If she only knew. "It's complicated, Maggie," I said, still staring at the lottery ticket on my counter. "She's got half the neighborhood thinking you're some kind of miser hoarding your pension while your own daughter struggles. You know that's not true, but people are starting to talk. People were starting to talk. About me being selfish. About me being a miser. About me not taking care of my family the way Winston Caldwell took care of his. Let them talk," I said quietly. "Polly, what's gotten into you? This isn't like you to just dismiss family problems." I looked at the lottery ticket again, at those numbers that had just made me one of the wealthiest men in Maine. Mo wanted half of everything I had because she thought she deserved it. She'd stolen from me, publicly humiliated me, and claimed I was the selfish one. Well, now I had something worth being selfish about. "I'll call you back later, Maggie. I have some thinking to do." "Polly, wait." I hung up and sat in my quiet kitchen, holding $85 million in my weathered hands, and began to plan exactly what my daughter deserved. The phone started ringing at 7 in the morning, jarring me from the first peaceful sleep I'd had in months. I'd spent the previous evening sitting in my living room holding that lottery ticket and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The years of sacrifice, the double shifts, the quiet dignity I'd maintained, even when my own daughter treated me like a burden. Dad Mo's voice exploded through the receiver before I could even say hello. "What the hell is going on? Sarah Henley just called me?" She said. "Her cousin works at the Lottery Commission and saw your name on some winner verification list." I settled back in my kitchen chair, cradling the phone against my ear. like I had all the time in the world. Outside, the morning fog was lifting off the harbor, revealing fishing boats already heading out for their day's work. Good morning to you too, Mo. Don't good morning me. Did you win the lottery or not? I looked at the ticket sitting on my kitchen table, those numbers that had transformed everything overnight. Yes, I did. The silence that followed was so complete. I could hear her breathing change, could practically see her mind racing through calculations and implications. How much? She whispered. $85 million. Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different tone entirely. Not the dismissive coldness of our last conversation, but something desperate and hungry. Dad, this is incredible. This is life-changing. We need to celebrate. We need to plan. We need to, the word hung in the air between us like a challenge. I could hear her office environment in the background, the muffled sounds of her important life continuing around her. Of course I bought that ticket, remember I told you at Thanksgiving? If it won big, half was mine. Everyone heard me say it. I almost smiled. Almost. You threw that ticket at me like garbage, Mo. You bought it with money you stole from my account, then claimed ownership as a joke. It wasn't a joke. Her voice pitched higher, taking on that frantic edge I remembered from her teenage years when she wanted something badly. I was serious about sharing. That's what family does. They share good fortune. Is that what family does? I asked quietly. Because 3 days ago you told me that Winston deserved an $8,000 watch more than I deserved financial security. You hung up on me when I called it theft. Dad, I was upset. I said things I didn't mean. But this is different. This is $85 million. There's enough for everyone. I watched a seagull land on my windowsill, its yellow eyes bright and predatory. It reminded me of something. You called me selfish, Mo. You said I was hoarding money while my daughter struggled. You posted on Facebook about what a terrible father I was. I'll delete those posts. Dad, please, you have to understand. I was hurt and angry. But I never stopped loving you. You're my father, and I want us to share this blessing together. The word blessing made my chest tighten. Margaret used to call unexpected good fortune a blessing back when finding a $20 bill in an old coat pocket was cause for celebration. Where's Winston in all this? I asked. What do you mean? Your generous father-in-law who deserved that expensive watch. The man who's been so good to your family. Surely he'd want to help you through this difficult time. Another pause. This is between us, Dad. Family business, I repeated. Like when you used my credit card for family business, Dad, please. Her voice broke on the word, and for a moment she sounded like the little girl who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared her. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But this is our chance to fix everything. $85 million could change our whole family's future. I stood up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the harbor where honest men were working for honest wages. The seagull had flown away, probably to find easier prey. You're right, Mo. This money will change everything. Thank God, she breathed. I knew you'd understand. I knew you wouldn't let anger destroy our family. You misunderstand me, I said quietly. This money will change everything because it's mine. All of it. The line went dead. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing with notifications I didn't understand. I'd never been much for social media. Margaret used to handle our computer needs, and after she died, I'd kept things simple. But my neighbor, Mrs. Murphy, knocked on my door around 3 o'clock, her weathered face creased with concern. Polly, dear, I think you should know what's being said about you online. She showed me her phone, and there it was. Mo's latest Facebook post, complete with a carefully staged photo of herself looking devastated, her eyes red-rimmed with what I now recognized as strategically applied tears. My heart is breaking as I write this, but I need your support, the post began. My father just won $85 million in the lottery, with a ticket I bought for him as a gift. I jokingly said we'd share if it won the way loving families do. But now he's decided to keep every penny, even though I'm facing financial hardship, and he knows I'm struggling to keep my house. I scrolled through the comments, each one feeling like a small knife to the chest. People I'd known for years, neighbors who'd waved to me from their gardens, were calling me greedy, selfish, ungrateful. They painted me as a bitter old man hoarding wealth while his daughter suffered. There's more, Mrs. Murphy said gently. She's posted on several community groups. The Seaside Community Facebook page featured another post. This one with a photo of our Thanksgiving dinner table. She must have taken it when I wasn't looking. The elegant watchbox sat prominently beside Winston, while my crumpled lottery ticket lay forgotten near my coffee cup. "This is what family loyalty looks like in my father's house," the caption read. An $8,000 gift for someone who's helped our family, and a $5 lottery ticket tossed at me like charity. When that ticket won 85 million, suddenly I'm the ungrateful one for expecting him to honor his word about sharing. The comments were worse on this one. People were sharing it, adding their own outraged commentary about how lottery winnings should be shared with family, how selfish old people become when money is involved, how I was probably suffering from some kind of age-related greed disorder. Mrs. Murphy patted my arm. "Don't you mind them, Polly. Anyone who knows you knows better." But as I walked to the corner store that evening for milk and bread, I felt the weight of those stares, the whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. Tom Henderson, who'd been my neighbor for 15 years, barely nodded when I passed his driveway. The cashier at Murphy's Market, usually friendly, avoided eye contact while ringing up my groceries. I understood what Mo was doing. She was turning my own community against me, making me the villain in a story where she was the wrong daughter, and I was the greedy father who'd forgotten the meaning of family. It was brilliant in its cruelty, and it was working. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table with that lottery ticket now worth more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. The numbers hadn't changed: 7, 1, 4, 2, 3, 3, 5, 4, 2, Powerball 18. But everything else had. My phone rang. Margaret's number again. "Polly, what in God's name is happening? I've got 3 different people calling me about Facebook posts. Mo's saying you won the lottery and won't share with your own daughter. It's complicated, Maggie." "Complicated how?" "She's your daughter. If you really won all that money." I could hear the doubt in her sister's voice, the way community opinion was already shifting the foundation of relationships I'd thought were solid. "She stole from me first," I said quietly. "Used my credit card without permission. Called me selfish and cruel. Hung up on me when I confronted her about it. But Polly, $85 million. Surely there's enough to what reward her for treating me like dirt. Teach her that stealing and manipulation get rewarded if the prize is big enough." The silence stretched between us. "I don't know what's happened to you," Maggie said finally, "but this isn't the brother I know." She hung up, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my ticket, and the growing realization that Mo's war was just beginning. The next morning brought an unexpected phone call that changed everything. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing my second cup of coffee and trying to work up the courage to face another day of suspicious stares and whispered conversations when the phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakable. "Mr. O'Brien, this is Winston Caldwell. I believe we need to talk." I nearly dropped the phone. Winston Caldwell, the man Mo had stolen from me to honor the hedge fund manager who looked at me like I was something he'd scrape off his expensive shoes, was calling me directly. "Mr. Caldwell," I managed. "What can I do for you? Actually, it's what I can do for you. I witnessed the entire gift exchange at your Thanksgiving dinner, and I've been watching this social media circus with growing disgust. What my daughter-in-law is doing is unconscionable." I sat back in my chair, stunned. "I'm sorry, what Mr. O'Brien, I may be wealthy, but I built that wealth on integrity. I cannot stand by and watch a good man's reputation be destroyed by lies and manipulation." His voice carried the kind of authority that came from years of boardroom negotiations. I was there. I saw exactly what happened. My hands were shaking as I gripped the phone. I watched Mo hand you that lottery ticket and explicitly call it your Father's Day gift. There was no negotiation, no agreement about sharing winnings, and certainly no verbal contract. It was a dismissive gesture, frankly, and I was embarrassed by her behavior even then. The relief that flooded through me was so intense I had to close my eyes. Someone had seen the truth. Someone with credibility and social standing had witnessed Mo's casual cruelty. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Winston's laugh was bitter. "Because my son has forgotten everything I taught him about honor and integrity. This lottery situation has revealed something about both of them that deeply disappoints me. They're destroying your reputation with lies, and I won't be party to it. What do you plan to do? I'm going to set the record straight. My name carries weight in this community, Mr. O'Brien. People know I don't lie about business matters, and this is exactly that, a matter of legal ownership and ethical behavior." Within an hour, Winston had posted a lengthy statement on Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Seaside community page. I watched the notifications pile up on Mrs. Murphy's phone as she sat in my kitchen, her eyes wide with amazement. As a witness to the Thanksgiving gathering at Paul O'Brien's home, Winston's post read, "I feel compelled to address the current controversy. I personally observed Mo Caldwell purchase and present a lottery ticket to her father as a Thanksgiving gift. There was no negotiation, no agreement about sharing winnings, and no conditions attached to the gift. Mr. O'Brien is the rightful owner of that ticket and any winnings it may have generated. The current social media campaign against him is based on false information, and I cannot remain silent while a good man's reputation is being destroyed by members of my own family. The response was immediate. Comments began appearing from people in the business community who knew Winston's reputation for honesty and fair dealing. The tide of public opinion which had been flowing so strongly against me began to shift. "Well, I'll be damned, Mrs." Murphy said, scrolling through the responses. "Look at this, Polly. People are apologizing to you. Tom Henderson just posted that he feels terrible for judging you without knowing the facts." My phone rang again. This time it was my sister Maggie. "Polly, I just saw Winston Caldwell's post. I'm so sorry I doubted you. I should have known better." "It's okay, Maggie. People believe what they want to believe." "No, it's not okay. You're my brother and I should have trusted you over Facebook gossip. Can you forgive me? I looked out my kitchen window at the harbor where fishing boats were heading out for another day of honest work. The morning sun was burning off the fog, revealing clear blue sky underneath. "Of course I can. That's what family does." But even as I said the words, I thought about Mo and how she'd twisted the meaning of family to serve her own purposes. Winston Caldwell had shown more family loyalty in one morning than my own daughter had in months. The main state lottery office in Portland was more impressive than I'd expected. Glass and steel reaching toward gray November clouds with security guards and an atmosphere of serious business that made my worn work jacket feel inadequate. I clutched the lottery ticket in a plastic sleeve, my palms sweating despite the cool morning air. I'd driven the 2 hours from Seaside in my old pickup truck, the same Ford I'd been driving for 12 years past lobster shacks and tourist shops that wouldn't see customers again until summer. The radio had been playing classic rock from my younger days, but I'd barely heard it over the sound of my own thoughts racing. $85 million. Even after Winston's vindication, even after the community's apologies, the number still seemed impossible. People like me didn't win the lottery. We bought tickets as small dreams, dollar fantasies to get us through another week of stretching a pension that never seemed to cover everything. "Mr. O'Brien." A woman in a professional suit approached with a warm smile. "I'm Janet Chen, Lottery Commission representative. Congratulations on your win." The word win made it real in a way that all my private checking and rechecking hadn't. I followed her through corridors lined with photos of previous winners, ordinary people holding oversized checks, and wearing expressions of stunned disbelief that I recognized completely. "This is quite a story," Janet said, as we settled in her office. "A Thanksgiving gift that turned into $85 million. The media will be very interested." "I'd prefer to keep things quiet," I said, thinking about Mo's social media war and the chaos that publicity might bring. "Of course. We offer winners the choice between a private meeting and a public ceremony. Given the recent attention your case has received, we thought you might prefer the transparency of a public presentation." I thought about the whispered conversations that had followed me through grocery stores about neighbors who'd questioned my character based on Facebook posts. Maybe transparency was exactly what I needed. Yes, I'd like the public ceremony. Janet placed my ticket under a specialized scanner, the same crumpled piece of paper that Mo had thrown at me like garbage. Under the bright office lights, it looked even more pathetic, coffee-stained and wrinkled from its journey through my kitchen trash. "Mr. O'Brien, I'm happy to confirm that this is indeed a winning ticket for $85 million. The verification process will take 48 hours for prizes of this magnitude. We need to confirm the ticket's authenticity through multiple security measures and prepare the legal documentation." The words seemed to echo in the sterile office space. I gripped the arms of my chair, afraid I might float away. "However," Janet continued, "I can tell you that everything looks perfectly legitimate. You'll need to decide between the lump sum payment of approximately $52 million after taxes or annual payments over 30 years. $52 million. Even after the government took their share, it was more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. More than I'd earned in 40 years of loading ships and fixing engines and working double shifts to put my daughter through college. I'll take the lump sum," I said. At 63, I didn't have 30 years to wait for payments, and I had plans for that money that couldn't wait. "Excellent choice. We'll schedule your ceremony for Friday morning. There will be media present, so dress appropriately." As I walked back to my truck in the parking garage, I felt different. Not just because of the money, though that was part of it. For the first time since Margaret died, I felt like I had purpose again. real purpose beyond just getting through each day. I thought about Mo probably sitting in her expensive office right now planning her next move. She'd demanded half of everything because she thought she deserved it. Well, she was about to find out exactly what she deserved. And it wasn't half. The drive back to Seaside had never felt shorter. I had work to do. The Lottery Commission headquarters buzzed with activity on Friday morning. Television crews adjusted lighting equipment. Photographers tested angles, and lottery officials bustled around with clipboards and ceremonial documents. I stood in my best Navy suit, the same one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral 5 years ago, feeling like an actor who'd wandered onto someone else's movie set. Mr. O'Brien, Janet Chen approached with her professional smile, ready to become officially wealthy. The oversized check required 2 people to hold it properly. $85 million printed in bold letters that seemed to glow under the camera lights. When Janet announced me as the winner, the applause felt surreal, like sound coming from underwater. "This is certainly unexpected," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying better than I'd hoped. "I plan to use this blessing responsibly to help others who deserve it, and to live with the kind of dignity that makes a person worthy of good fortune." The questions from reporters came rapidly. How did it feel to win? What were my plans? Would I quit working? I answered as honestly as I could, focusing on gratitude and responsibility rather than the family drama that had brought me here. Then, through the crowd of media personnel, I saw them. Mo pushed through the gathering like a woman possessed, her face flushed with determination and desperation. She wore one of her power suits, the kind she reserved for important business meetings, but her perfectly styled hair was disheveled and her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. "Stop," she called out, her voice cutting through the professional atmosphere like a fire alarm. "That's my ticket. We had an agreement." Security personnel moved immediately, but Mo's voice carried over their intervention. The cameras, which had been focused on me and the ceremonial check, swiveled toward the commotion like predators scenting blood. "Everyone here needs to know that ticket was mine," she continued, gesticulating wildly as 2 security guards flanked her. "I bought it as a gift, but I specifically said half the winnings were mine. This man is stealing from his own daughter." The reporters thrust microphones toward both of us, sensing the kind of drama that television news lived for. I looked directly at Mo, feeling calmer than I had in months. "Mo, please don't do this here." But she was beyond reason, her eyes wild with the desperation of someone watching their last chance slip away. "I have witnesses." Everyone at Thanksgiving dinner heard me say it. "This is theft, plain and simple." A reporter pushed forward. "Mr. O'Brien, can you comment on this family dispute?" "The ticket was a Thanksgiving gift from my daughter," I said clearly, my voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around me. "Mr. Winston Caldwell, who was present at the dinner, has already confirmed the circumstances of that gift on social media. That's all there is to say about it." "What do you plan to do with the money?" another reporter asked. I thought about Mo screaming in the background about the months of manipulation and betrayal, about the years I'd spent enabling her worst impulses out of misguided parental love. "I plan to help others who truly deserve it," I said. "I want to start a foundation I've dreamed about for years, and I intend to live with the kind of integrity that makes a person worthy of unexpected blessings." The ceremony concluded with handshakes and official paperwork, while Mo and her husband argued beside their BMW in the parking lot. I could see them through the windows, their gestures growing more animated, their relationship fracturing under the weight of their own greed and desperation. As I walked to my pickup truck, carrying the ceremonial check and official documentation that made me one of the wealthiest men in Maine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with my decisions. I drove away from Portland with my windows down, the November air crisp and clean, watching Mo and her husband still arguing in my rearview mirror until they disappeared around a bend in the road. For the first time since Margaret died, I was driving toward a future instead of away from a past. I was sitting in my living room that evening, still wearing my good suit, when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Mo walking toward my front door, but her demeanor was completely different from the aggressive desperation she'd shown at the lottery ceremony. She moved slowly, almost hesitantly, her shoulders slumped in a way that reminded me of the little girl who used to come to me when she'd had nightmares. Instead of her usual bold entrance, she knocked softly, 3 gentle taps that sounded almost apologetic. I opened the door to find her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, her expensive clothes wrinkled as if she'd been sleeping in them. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by something that looked like genuine vulnerability. "Dad, could we talk, please?" Against my better judgment, I let her in. She followed me to the living room, perching on the edge of the couch like a bird ready to take flight, her hands twisting in her lap as she looked around the modest space that had once been her childhood home. "I'm so sorry about today," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just overwhelmed and scared. I wasn't thinking clearly." The tears came then streaming down her cheeks with what seemed like genuine remorse. "Winston has been pressuring me so much about money lately. Our finances are worse than I told anyone. I didn't know who else to turn to." I settled into my recliner, maintaining careful distance between us. "What kind of financial trouble, Mo? We're about to lose our house," she said, her voice breaking on the words. "The mortgage payments, the credit cards, Winston's business investments, it's all falling apart. We owe almost $400,000, and the bank is starting foreclosure proceedings." She painted a picture of sleepless nights, panic attacks, and desperate attempts to keep up appearances while their world crumbled. Winston's hedge fund was hemorrhaging money, she claimed, losing clients and facing potential bankruptcy. The country club membership, they couldn't afford to cancel the private school tuition that was draining their resources. I was too embarrassed to ask for help before she continued, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "You know how proud Winston is. He'd die if he knew I was here begging my father for money." I listened to her performance, and it was a performance I realized with painful clarity. The same techniques she'd used as a teenager when she wanted something: the tears, the helpless victim routine, the appeals to my protective instincts. "You've always been there for me before," she said, reaching across the space between us to touch my hand. "I just need help one more time. Just enough to save our house and get back on our feet." "How much, Mo?" "2 million would solve everything," she said quickly, as if she'd rehearsed the number. "It sounds like a lot, but it's nothing compared to what you won. You'd still have over 50 million left." The simplicity of her request was breathtaking. $2 million, more than I'd earned in my entire working life, delivered as casually as asking to borrow $20 for gas. "Mo," I said gently, "I've heard these same promises before." Her expression shifted slightly, confusion flickering across her features. "What do you mean? You stole from my account without asking. You publicly humiliated me on social media. You tried to claim my lottery ticket by force." I kept my voice calm, factual. "Now you want me to reward that behavior by giving you $2 million. This is different." The tears came faster, now more desperate. "I was wrong before. I admit that. But we're talking about losing everything, Dad. Our house, our life, Tyler's education. You need to learn to solve your own problems, Mo." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Mo's face transformed the mask of vulnerability, slipping to reveal something harder underneath. "You're really going to do this? You're going to let your own daughter lose her house while you sit on $50 million? I love you, Mo, but I won't enable your choices anymore." She stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "Fine. But don't expect to be part of Tyler's life going forward. Don't expect Christmas visits or family dinners or phone calls when he graduates high school." I looked at my daughter and saw a stranger. 3 months later, I stood in my new workshop in Burlington, Vermont, running my weathered hands along the smooth surface of a cherrywood dining table I'd just finished. The afternoon light streamed through tall windows, illuminating sawdust motes that danced in the air like tiny golden spirits. The drive from Maine had taken 4 hours through autumn countryside, painted in shades of red and gold. I'd chosen Burlington deliberately, far enough from seaside that unexpected visits would require real commitment, close enough to the mountains that reminded me of the strength I'd found in myself. My house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, the kind of neighborhood where people still waved to strangers and children rode bicycles without fear. Mrs. Henderson next door had brought me homemade cookies on my first day, and Tom Sullivan across the street had offered to help me move my tools into the workshop I'd built behind the house. "You sure you want to work this hard at your age?" Tom had asked, watching me unload my table saw and hand planes. "Most folks your age are thinking about slowing down." "I'm just getting started," I'd told him, and meant it. O'Brien's fine woodworking had been my dream for 40 years, pushed aside by the necessities of steady paychecks and raising a family. Now, with financial security, I'd never imagined I could finally build the furniture I'd always envisioned, pieces that would last generations, crafted with the same attention to detail I'd learned on the docks. The workshop smelled of cedar and pine honest scents that reminded me who I was underneath all the lottery winner headlines. I'd hired 2 local craftsmen, both veterans, who understood the satisfaction that comes from creating something beautiful with your own hands. "Mr. O'Brien." Sarah Martinez, my assistant, poked her head through the workshop door. "The reporter from Vermont Life is here for the interview about the Veterans Foundation." The Paul O'Brien Veterans Assistance Foundation had been my first major decision after claiming the lottery prize. I'd started it with $5 million, focusing on helping veterans transition to civilian careers, particularly in skilled trades. The foundation provided tools, training, and startup funding for veterans who wanted to build their own businesses. "Send her in," I said, wiping sawdust from my hands. The interview went well. The reporter was genuinely interested in the foundation's work, in the dozen veterans we'd already helped start their own businesses, in the woodworking apprenticeship program we were launching next month. "What made you choose veterans as your focus?" she asked. I thought about the men I'd worked alongside on the docks, many of them veterans who'd come home from various wars and found purpose in honest labor. They understand the value of work, of building something with their hands. They deserve the chance to create their own futures. "Any regrets about leaving your old life behind?" I looked around my workshop at the half-finished rocking chair that would soon grace someone's front porch, at the dining table that would host family dinners for decades to come. Through the window I could see the mountains in the distance, solid and permanent against the changing sky. "No regrets," I said honestly. "Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you actually needed." That evening I sat on my front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. My phone had stopped ringing months ago. No more desperate calls from Mo, no more attempts at manipulation or reconciliation. The silence had been difficult at first, the way amputations are difficult until you learn to live with what remains. But I'd learned something important in these 3 months of peace. Family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, loyalty, and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions or price tags. The veterans I worked with, the neighbors who'd welcomed me, the craftsmen who shared my workshop. They'd become my family now, bound together by shared values and mutual respect, rather than obligation or guilt. As the stars began to appear in the clear Vermont sky, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Margaret died: complete contentment with the life I was building, one honest day at a time. 6 months into my new life, I found myself standing in my workshop on a quiet Sunday morning, holding the original lottery ticket in my hands. I'd had it framed and mounted on my office wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how the most valuable gifts sometimes come disguised as garbage. The ticket looked even more pathetic under glass, coffee-stained, wrinkled from its journey through my kitchen trash, the numbers barely legible. But those faded digits had taught me more about family dignity and self-worth than 40 years of enabling ever could. "You keeping that old thing as a good luck charm?" asked Mike Rodriguez, one of the veterans I'd hired. He'd stopped by to pick up some tools, but lingered to admire the rocking chair I was finishing. "Something like that," I said. "It reminds me that sometimes the most necessary lessons come wrapped in pain." Mike nodded with the understanding of someone who'd faced his own difficult truths. "My dad used to say that character isn't what you do when things are easy. It's what you do when everything falls apart." I thought about Mo, probably still struggling with the consequences of her choices. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she and Winston had indeed lost their house, that their marriage was strained to the breaking point. Part of me, the father part, that would always love the little girl she'd once been, felt sorry for her. But I'd learned that loving someone doesn't mean rescuing them from the natural consequences of their actions. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let people face the results of their choices. The afternoon sun slanted through my workshop windows, illuminating the furniture I'd created with my own hands. Each piece represented something I'd never had when I was focused on pleasing others, the satisfaction of work done for its own sake rather than for approval or gratitude that never came. My phone had been quiet for months now. No desperate calls, no manipulation attempts, no social media wars. The silence had been difficult at first, but I'd grown to appreciate its honesty. Real relationships don't require constant maintenance through guilt and obligation. As evening approached, I locked up the workshop and walked to my front porch, where I sat with my coffee and watched the mountains catch the last light of day. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new veterans, to help new opportunities to build something meaningful. The lottery ticket had given me $85 million, but the real prize had been learning the difference between being needed and being used, between family and manipulation, between enabling and love. Some lessons are worth every penny they cost to learn. A full year had passed since I'd left Maine, and as I sat in my workshop, surrounded by the furniture I'd crafted and the lives I'd helped rebuild, I realized that Mo had been right about one thing: the lottery ticket had indeed changed everything. Just not in the ways she'd imagined. The money had given me freedom, certainly. Freedom from financial worry, freedom to pursue work that mattered, freedom to help others without expecting anything in return. But the real transformation had come from something far more valuable than $85 million, the courage to finally set boundaries with someone I loved. I'd spent most of my adult life believing that love meant saying yes, that being a good father meant enabling my daughter's worst impulses, that family loyalty required sacrificing my own dignity on the altar of keeping peace. The lottery ticket had forced me to confront the difference between love and enabling, between family and manipulation. Mr. O'Brien, Sarah, called from the office. Channel 8 is here for the Foundation anniversary interview. I smiled, setting down my sanding block. The Veterans Foundation had grown beyond my wildest expectations, helping over 50 veterans start their own businesses in just 1 year. Each success story reminded me that sometimes the most generous thing you can do is teach someone to build their own future, rather than simply handing them money. As I walked toward the interview, I thought about the framed lottery ticket on my wall, those faded numbers that had taught me the most expensive lesson of my life. Mo had thrown it at me like garbage, claiming half ownership of something she'd purchased with stolen money. She'd been wrong about the ownership, but right about one thing: that ticket had been worth exactly half to her. 0. Because the real value had never been in the numbers. It had been in learning that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who respect you the least. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. The interview could wait another moment. I had one final thought to share about what that $5 ticket had really taught me about family dignity and the price of self-respect. As I prepared for that interview, I realized the most important lesson that $5 lottery ticket had taught me wasn't about money at all. It was about the difference between being loved and being used, between family and manipulation, between enabling someone's worst impulses and actually helping them grow. For years, I'd believed that being a good father meant saying yes to everything that love required, sacrificing my own dignity to keep the peace. I'd confused enabling with caring, weakness with kindness. That crumpled lottery ticket had forced me to confront a painful truth. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who respect you the least. Mo had thrown that ticket at me like garbage, bought with money she'd stolen from my account, then claimed half ownership of whatever it might be worth. The perfect symbol of how she saw our relationship. She would take what she wanted, give me scraps, and still expect gratitude for the privilege. But that worthless piece of paper had taught me something invaluable: that real family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect, loyalty, and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions or price tags. The veterans I worked with now, the neighbors who'd welcomed me to Vermont, the craftsmen who shared my workshop, they'd become my true family, bound together by shared values and mutual respect. The lottery ticket still hangs framed in my workshop, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Those faded numbers represent the most expensive education I ever received, learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, that setting boundaries isn't selfish but necessary, and that you can't buy dignity, you can only choose to keep it or give it away. I'm 64 years old now, and for the first time since Margaret died, I wake up each morning with purpose. Not the purpose that comes from being needed by people who don't respect you, but the satisfaction of building something meaningful with your own hands, of helping others without expecting anything in return, of living with integrity, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. Some lessons are worth every penny they cost to learn, and some gifts disguised as garbage turn out to be exactly what you needed all along. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey with Polly O'Brien. www. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like and share it with someone who might need to hear about standing up for their own dignity today. Your comments mean the world to us. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Please share your thoughts below. And if you want more stories that celebrate the strength found in life's unexpected turns, and the wisdom that comes from standing up for what's right, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our weekly tales that honor the dignity of everyday heroes. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to reclaim your self-respect and build the life you truly deserve.